Hello, hello. Sorry for the delay. Everything is sorted now. Welcome to Emerald Lake. I'm Raven. I think everybody here probably knows me, but just in case. Good evening. Yes. Oh, this noisy chair that suddenly flings. Okay. Alright. Good to see you guys in the chat. My first story tonight will be the history of Jack the Giant Killer. Noisy. And I'll just be reading the end of the stories that we had not yet read in the Blue Fairy book on the site where I found all of my tales. We'll probably finish this book tonight, and then tomorrow I think I'll be doing only one stream. Yeah, they probably did do a movie about this one. My brain was like, this is the same as Jack and the Beanstalk, but it might be something different. But it does sound familiar, like it was the movie. It says something about in the reign of King Arthur, so if that's in the movie, I guess that's it. What was I saying? Yeah. So tomorrow I'm probably just doing one stream so that I can work on some other things for you guys. I'm gonna be working on emotes, sorting out more fleshed out about me section, the about section on my channel, and things like that. And then I'll also probably be doing a lighter set of streams the next week. I start up that Sunday and so on, because I am off on a trip soon and I have to prep for that. So I'm very glad that everybody's been with me for the streams I've been doing, and unfortunately I have to take a half a step back for a little bit, and then I'll be back doing lots again. I'm not sure exactly what I'll be reading tomorrow for the one stream I do, but I think it will be jumping into the cryptid things. And then yeah, once I get back from my trip, I'll probably, maybe even before, I'll be making sure that I have my origami stream that I'm gonna start doing, and just fleshing out all the rest of the stuffs. Awesome. Glad somebody's looking forward to those. Yeah. I hope that that's all good, that I'll be doing a little less. I'll miss the earlier in the day, still evening-ish stories. But yeah. Alright. Let's jump into Jack, the Giant Killer. Oh, come on now, things. There we go. In the reign of the famous King Arthur, there lived in Cornwall a lad named Jack, who was a boy of a bold temper, and took delight in hearing or reading of conjurers, giants, and fairies, and this thing. In the reign of the famous King Arthur, there lived in Cornwall a lad named Jack, who was a boy of a bold temper, and took delight in hearing or reading of conjurers, giants, and fairies, and used to listen eagerly to the deeds of the knights of King Arthur's Round Table. In those days there lived on St. Michael's Mount, off Cornwall, a huge giant, 18 feet high and 9 feet round. His fierce and savage looks were the terror of all who beheld him. He dwelt in a gloomy cavern on the top of the mountain, and used to wade over the mainland in search of prey, when he would throw 6 oxen upon his back, and tie 3 times as many sheep and hogs round his waist, and march back to his own abode. The giant had done this for many years when Jack resolved to destroy him. Jack took a horn, a shovel, a pickaxe, his armor, and a dark lantern, and one winter's evening he went to the mount. There he dug a pit 22 feet deep and 20 broad. He covered the top over so as to make it look like solid ground. He then blew his horn so loudly that the giant awoke and came out of his den crying out, "You saucy villain, you shall pay for this. I'll broil you for my breakfast." He had just finished when, taking one step further, he tumbled headlong into the pit, and Jack struck him a blow on the head with his pickaxe, which killed him. Yes, saucy villain. What a fun little turn of phrase for that. Jack then returned home to cheer his friends with the news. Another giant, called Blunderbore, vowed to be revenged on Jack if he ever should have him in his power. This giant kept an enchanted castle in the midst of a lonely wood, and sometime after the death of Coromon, I guess which was the first giant, Jack was passing through a wood, and being weary, sat down and went to sleep. The giant, passing by and seeing Jack, carried him to his castle, where he locked him up in a large room, the floor of which was covered with the bodies, skulls, and bones of men and women. Soon after, the giant went to fetch his brother, who was likewise a giant, to take a meal of his flesh, and Jack saw with terror through the bars of his prison the 2 giants approaching. Yes, sorry. Very decorative. The words or the giants. I'd say both. Okay. Jack, perceiving in one corner of the room a strong cord, took courage, and making a slip knot at each end, he threw them over their heads and tied it to the window bars. He then pulled till he had choked them. When they were black in the face, he slid down the rope and stabbed them to the heart. Jack next took a great bunch of keys from the pocket of Blunderbore and went into the castle again. He made a strict search through all the rooms, and in one of them found 3 ladies tied up by the hair of their heads and almost starved to death. They told him that their husbands had been killed by the giants, who had then condemned them to be starved to death because they would not eat the flesh of their own dead husbands. So the giants killed the husbands and then were trying to feed the wives those bodies. "Ladies," said Jack, "I have put an end to the monster and his wicked brother, and I give you this castle and all the riches it contains to make some amends for the dreadful pains you have felt." He then very politely gave them the keys of the castle and went further on his journey to Wales. As Jack had but little money, he went on as fast as possible. At length he came to a handsome house. Jack knocked at the door, when there came forth a Welsh giant. Jack said he was a traveller who lost his way, on which the giant made him welcome, and let him into a room where there was a good bed to sleep in. Jack took off his clothes quickly, but though he was weary, he could not go to sleep. Soon after this he heard the giant walking backward and forward in the next room, and saying to himself, "Though here you lodge with me this night, you shall not see the morning light. My club shall dash your brains out quite." "So you say you so?" thought Jack. "Are these your tricks upon travellers? but I hope to prove as cunning as you are." Then, getting out of bed, he groped about the room, and at last found a large, thick billet of wood. He laid it in his own place in the bed, and then hid himself in a dark corner of the room. The giant, at about midnight, entered the apartment, and with his bludgeon struck as many blows on the bed, in the very place where Jack had laid the log, and then went back to his own room, thinking he had broken all Jack's bones. That's just reminding me of the story where I think it was an ogre blindly killed his own children, thinking that he killed little boys, and it's like, why do you kill people in the dark and then don't bother to check anything and do nothing with it? Why is that the way you go that way? Okay. Early in the morning, Jack put a bold face upon the matter and walked into the giant's room to thank him for his lodging. The giant started when he saw him and began to stammer out, "Oh dear me, is it you? Pray, how did you sleep last night? Did you hear or see anything in the dead of night?" "Nothing to speak of," said Jack carelessly. "A rat, I believe, gave me 3 or 4 slaps with his tail and disturbed me a little, but I soon went to sleep again." What a way to say you're weak shit. The giant wondered more and more at this, yet he did not answer a word, but went to bring 2 great bowls of hasty pudding for their breakfast. "I'll clean this up in the morning." Yeah, they seem to keep, that's what they're like thinking every time. "I'll deal with that in the morning." And then just slaps their hands, dusts clean. Hasty pudding for breakfast, right? Jack wanted to make the giant believe that he could eat as much as himself, so he contrived to button a leathern bag inside his coat, and slip the hasty pudding into his bag, while he seemed to put it into his mouth. When breakfast was over, he said to the giant, "Now I will show you a fine trick. I can cure all wounds with a touch. I could cut off my head in 1 minute, and the next put it sound again on my shoulders. You shall see an example." He then took hold of the knife, ripped up the leathern bag, and all the hasty pudding tumbled out upon the floor. "Odd splutter her nails," cried the Welsh giant. So I'm guessing that that's something Welsh, and I'm sorry, I don't know how to translate or say that. "Odd splutter her nails," cried the Welsh giant, who was ashamed to be outdone by such a little fellow as Jack. "Her can do that herself." So he snatched up the knife, plunged it into his own stomach, and in a moment dropped down dead. All right. Okay. Jack, having hitherto been successful in all his undertakings, resolved not to be idle in future. He therefore furnished himself with a horse, a cap of knowledge, a sword of sharpness, shoes of swiftness, and an invisible coat, the better to perform the wonderful enterprises that lay before him. Where did he get those things? Okay. He traveled over high hills, and on the 3rd day he came to a large and spacious forest. Yeah, he did. He got all the magic items. Large and spacious forest, through which his road lay. Scarcely had he entered the forest when he beheld a monstrous giant dragging along by the hair of their heads a handsome knight and his lady. Jack alighted from his horse, and tying him to an oak tree, put on his invisible coat, under which he carried his sword of sharpness. Hello, Scoopy. We're just reading this Jack the Giant Killer story. Welcome. Okay. He's got on a coat and he's carrying his sword. So he's invisible and he has a knife. When he came up to the giant, he made several strokes at him, but could not reach his body, but wounded his thighs in several places, and at length, putting both hands to his sword and aiming with all his might, he cut off both his legs. Then Jack, setting his foot upon his neck, plunged his sword into the giant's body, when the monster gave a groan and expired. I'm glad you like my voice. I'll do my best since you're here and tired, to keep it cool and not go unhinged. If we have an unhinged story, I apologize for that then. We'll see what we can do. But that giant is now dead. The knight and his lady thanked Jack for their deliverance and invited him to their house to receive a proper reward for his services. Thanks, guys. You're so nice. Okay. They want to take Jack to their house for proper reward. No, said Jack. I cannot be easy till I find out this monster's habitation. So taking the knight's directions, he mounted his horse and soon after came in sight of another giant, who was sitting on a block of timber waiting for his brother's return. Jack alighted from his horse and putting on his invisible coat, well, we all have one of those anyway, gets invisible coat, approached and aimed a blow at the giant's head, but missing his aim, he only cut off his nose. On this the giant seized his club and laid about him most unmercifully. Nay, said Jack, if this be the case, I'd better dispatch you. So, jumping upon the block, he stabbed him in the back then he dropped down dead. Jack then proceeded on his journey and travelled over hills and dales till arriving at the foot of a high mountain, he knocked at the door of a lonely house, when an old man let him in. When Jack was seated, the hermit thus addressed him, My son, on the top of this mountain is an enchanted castle, kept by the giant Galligantus, and a vile magician. Okay. He's a giant and a magician. I lament the fate of a duke's daughter whom... Oh no, there is a giant and a magician. I lament the fate of a duke's daughter whom they seized as she was walking in her father's garden and brought hither transformed into a deer. A deer woman, you say? If you don't know, that is me. I don't have my antlers yet. Although my artist is nearly done, I'm very excited. Okay. Jack promised that in the evening, at the risk of his life, he would break the enchantment, and after a sound sleep he rose early, put on his invisible coat, and got ready for the attempt. I'm so happy to help out, and I'm glad you can de-stress. If you fall asleep, that is perfectly fine and good. We get lots of that in this chat. It happens lots. I love it. Don't worry. Jack promised that in the morning, at the risk of his life, he would break the enchantment, put on the invisible coat, and got ready for the attempt. When he had climbed to the top of the mountain, he saw 2 fiery griffins, but he passed between them without the least fear of danger, for they could not see him because of his invisible coat. On the castle gate he found a golden trumpet, under which were written these lines, Whoever can this trumpet blow shall cause the giant's overthrow. As soon as Jack had read this, he seized the trumpet and blew a shrill blast, which made the gates fly open and the very castle itself tremble. The giant and the conjurer now knew that their wicked course was at an end, and they stood biting their thumbs and shaking with fear. Jack, with his sword of sharpness, soon killed the giant, and the magician was then carried away by a whirlwind. And every night and beautiful lady who had been changed into birds and beasts returned to their proper shapes. The castle vanished away like smoke, and the head of the giant Galligantus was then sent to King Arthur. The knights and ladies rested that night at the old man's hermitage, and the next day they set out for the court. Jack then went up to the king and gave his majesty an account of all his fierce battles. Jack's fame had now spread through the whole country, and at the king's desire the duke gave him his daughter in marriage, to the joy of all his kingdom. After this the king gave him a large estate on which he and his lady lived for the rest of their days in joy and contentment. The end. That one ended quite like this whole story was just, this is how he killed all of the giants he found. There was no main reasoning, like we don't know, was that all of the giants there ever was? Was there more reasoning to get rid of all these giants? Was it a plan like he knew of these giants? It felt like it was just like, okay, cool, you killed a lot of giants. But that one was probably the last one, that's good. Okay. The end. Like, I don't know. Like the way this one is written just feels more like a real story than a made up story, I guess is what I'm saying. And it's very interesting. It did end kind of nicely. It was all very just, and that was that. Alright. The next story was going to be a bit of a long one. One that I probably have to break in between, maybe twice. It looks very long. So, because of that, I was going to try to shove in an ad now while we're on a break to buy more time for that. So, those of you that are trying to fall asleep, this is your warning that it's about to be loud probably for a minute, and then you can be calm and such. All right. There we go. That's going. And now I better type out this new. It's a long title. It'll be a minute. Cooperate. Okay, so this one is called The Story of Prince Ahmed and the Fairy Paribanou. I'm probably going to pronounce a million things wrong. Let's try this again. Here. This is called The Story, not Sorry. The Story of Prince Ahmed and the Fairy Paribanou. Haha, there you go. It's all just little goofs. I'm sorry. Okay. But yes, there's going to be so many names that I do not know how to pronounce assumedly correctly. I mean, that's kind of how a lot of my stories have gone. I'm guessing at a lot of this, but I see immediately a bunch of multi-syllable names. I'm not trying to hurt my brain tonight, but it's not wanting to pronounce things terribly well, so this is going to be a fun time. But okay. And it's a long one, like I said, so we'll definitely need break. But yeah, alright. If y'all are ready, I'm just about ready. Okay. There was a sultan who had 3 sons and a niece. The eldest of the princes was called Hussein, the second Ali, the youngest Ahmed, and the princess, his niece, Nuranihar. Nuranihar. Okay. That's a cute little emote, Scooby. I like that one. Okay. The princess Nuranihar was the daughter of the younger brother of the sultan, who died and left the princess very young. The sultan took upon himself the care of his daughter's education and brought her up in his palace with the 3 princes, proposing to marry her when she arrived at a proper age, and to contract an alliance with some neighboring prince by that means. But when he perceived that the 3 princes, his sons, loved her passionately, he thought more seriously on that affair. So these princes liked their cousin? Oh, yay! We're back to royalty and cousins. Yeah. We've actually only seen it once before in this, so I'm glad about that. That is a fun squiddly, dude. And an awesome potato response to the cousin thing. Very, very welcome, Scooby, with those. You have thoroughly earned a place in the chat. Anyway, the sultan, was very much concerned. The difficulty he foresaw was to make them agree, and that the 2 youngest should consent to yield her up to their elder brother, as he found them positively obstinate. He sent for them all together, and said to them, "Children, since for your good and quiet I have not been able to persuade you no longer to aspire the princess, your cousin, I think it would not be amiss if everyone travelled separately into different countries, so that you might not meet each other. And, as you know I am very curious, and delight in everything that's singular, I promise my niece in marriage to him that shall bring me the most extraordinary rarity, and for the purchase of the rarity you shall go in search after, and the expense of travelling I will give you every one a sum of money." As the 3 princes were always submissive and obedient to the sultan's will, and each flattered himself fortune might prove favourable to him, they all consented to it. The sultan paid them the money he promised them, and that every day they gave orders for the preparations for their travels, and took their leave of the sultan, that they might be the more ready to go the next morning. Accordingly, they all set out at the same gate of the city, each dressed like a merchant, attended by an officer of confidence dressed like a slave, and all well mounted and equipped. They went the first day's journey together, and all lay at an inn, where the road was divided into 3 different tracks. At night, when they were at supper together, they all agreed to travel for a year, and to meet at that inn, and that the first that came should wait for the rest, that, as they had all 3 taken their leave together of the sultan, they might all return together. The next morning, by break of day, after they had embraced and wished each other good success, they mounted their horses and took each a different road. Prince Hussein, the eldest brother, arrived at Bisnagar, the capital of the kingdom of that name, and the residence of its king. He went and lodged at a khan appointed for foreign merchants, and having learned that there were 4 principal divisions where merchants of all sorts sold their commodities and kept shops, and in the midst of which stood the castle, or rather the king's palace, he went to one of these divisions the next day. Prince Hussein could not view this division without admiration. It was large and divided into several streets, all vaulted and shaded from the sun, and yet very light, too. The shops were all of a size, and all that dealt in the same sort of goods lived in one street, as also the handicraftsmen, who kept their shops in smaller streets. The multitude of shops, stocked with all sorts of merchandise, as the finest linens from several parts of India, some painted in the most lively colors, and representing beasts, trees, and flowers, silks and brocades from Persia, China, and other places, porcelain both from Japan and China, and tapestries surprised him so much that he knew not how to believe his own eyes. But when he came to the goldsmiths and jewelers, he was in a kind of ecstasy to behold such prodigious quantities of wrought gold and silver, and was dazzled by the lustre of the pearls, diamonds, rubies, emeralds, and other jewels exposed to sale. Another thing Prince Hussein particularly admired was the great number of rose sellers who crowded the streets, for the Indians are so great lovers of that flower that no one will stir without a nosegay in his hand or garland on his head, and the merchants keep them in pots in their shops, that the air is perfectly perfumed. One sec. Okay. After Prince Hussein had run through that division, street by street, his thoughts fully employed on the riches he had seen, he was very much tired, which a merchant perceiving, civilly invited him to sit down in his shop, and he accepted, but had not been sat down long before he saw a crier pass by with a piece of tapestry on his arm, about 6 feet square, and cried at 30 purses. The prince called to the crier and asked to see the tapestry, which seemed to him to be valued at an exorbitant price, not only for the size of it, but the meanness of the stuff. When he had examined it well, he told the crier that he could not comprehend how so small a piece of tapestry and so indifferent in appearance could be set at so high a price. The crier, who took him for a merchant, replied, "If this price seems so extravagant to you, your amazement will be greater when I tell you I have orders to raise it to 40 purses, and not to part with it under." "Certainly," answered Prince Hussein, "it must have something very extraordinary in it, which I know nothing of." "You have guessed it, sir," replied the crier, "and will own it when you come to know that whoever sits on this piece of tapestry may be transported in an instant wherever he desires to be, without being stopped by any obstacle." At this discourse the crier of the Prince of the Indies, considering that the principal motive of his travel was to carry the Sultan his father home some singular rarity, thought that he could not meet with any which could give him more satisfaction. "If the tapestry," said he to the crier, "has the virtue you assign it, I shall not think 40 purses too much, but shall make you a present besides." "Sir," replied the crier, "I have told you the truth, and it is an easy matter to convince you of it, as soon as you have made the bargain for 40 purses, on condition I show you the experiment. But as I suppose you have not so much about you, and to receive them I must go with you to your khan, where you lodge, with the leave of the master of the shop, we will go into the back shop, and I will spread the tapestry, and when we have both sat down, and you have formed the wish to be transported into your apartment of the khan, if we are not transported thither, it shall be no bargain, and you shall be at your liberty. As to your present, though I am paid for my trouble by the seller, I shall receive it as a favor, and very much obliged to you, and thankful." On the credit of the crier, the prince accepted the conditions, and concluded the bargain, and having got the master's leave, they went into his back shop. They both sat down on it, and as soon as the prince formed his wish to be transported into his apartment at the khan, he presently found himself and the crier there, and as he wanted not a more sufficient proof of the virtue of the tapestry, he counted the crier out 40 pieces of gold, and gave him 20 pieces for himself. In this manner Prince Hussein became the possessor of the tapestry, and was overjoyed that at his arrival at Bisnagar he had found so rare a piece, which he never disputed would gain him the hand of Nouronihar. In short, he looked upon it as an impossible thing for the princes, his younger brothers, to meet with anything to be compared with it. It was in his power, by sitting on his tapestry, to be at the place of meeting that very day, but as he was obliged to stay there for his brothers, as they had agreed, and as he was curious to see the king of Bisnagar and his court, and to inform himself of the strength, laws, customs, and religion of the kingdom, he chose to make a longer abode there, and to spend some months in satisfying his curiosity. Prince Hussein might have made a longer abode in the kingdom and court of Bisnagar, but he was so eager to be near the princess that, spreading the tapestry, he and the officer he had brought with him sat down, and as soon as he had formed his wish, were transported to the inn at which he and his brothers were to meet, and where he passed for a merchant till they came. So he took a little bit of time to stick around, but then he still went back. Prince Ali, Prince Hussein's second brother, who designed to travel into Persia, took the road, having 3 days after he parted with his brothers, joined a caravan, and after 4 days' travel arrived at Shiraz, which was the capital of the kingdom of Persia, where he passed for a jeweler. The next morning Prince Ali, who travelled only for his pleasure and had brought nothing but just necessaries along with him, after he had dressed himself, took a walk into that part of the town which they at Shiraz called the Bezestein. Again, so many words I do not know yet. Among all the criers who passed backward and forward with several sorts of goods, offering to sell them, he was not a little surprised to see one who held an ivory telescope in his hand of about a foot in length and the thickness of a man's thumb, and cried it at 30 purses. At first he thought the crier mad, and to inform himself went to a shop, and said to the merchant, who stood at the door, "Pray, sir, is not that man," pointing to the crier, who cried the ivory perspective glass at 30 purses, "mad? If he is not, I am very much deceived." Whoa, what is that? Pointing? Okay. "Indeed, sir," answered the merchant, "he was in his right senses yesterday. I can assure you he is one of the ablest criers we have, and the most employed of any when anything valuable is to be sold. And if he cries the ivory perspective glass at 30 purses, it must be worth as much or more, on some account or other. He will come by presently, and we will call him, and you shall be satisfied. In the meantime, sit down on my sofa and rest yourself." Prince Ali accepted the merchant's obliging offer, and presently afterward the crier passed by. The merchant called him by his name, and pointing up to the prince, said to him, "Tell that gentleman who asked me if you were in your right senses, what you mean by crying that ivory perspective glass, which seems not to be worth much, at 30 purses. I should be very much amazed myself if I did not know you." The crier, addressing himself to Prince Ali, said, "Sir, you are not the only person that takes me for a madman on account of this perspective glass. You shall judge yourself whether I am or no, when I have told you in its property, and I hope you will value it at as high a price as those I have showed it to already, who had as bad an opinion of me as you. First, sir, pursued the crier, presenting the ivory pipe to the prince, observe that this pipe is furnished with a glass at both ends, and consider that by looking through one of them you see whatever object you wish to behold. I am, said the prince, ready to make you all imaginable reparation for the scandal I have thrown on you, if you will make the truth of what you advance appear. And as he had the ivory pipe in his hand, after he had looked at the two glasses, he said, show me at which of these ends I must look that I may be satisfied. The crier presently showed him, and he looked through, wishing at the same time to see the Sultan his father, whom he immediately beheld in perfect health, set on his throne in the midst of his council. Afterward, as there was nothing in the world so dear to him after the Sultan as the Princess Nouronihar, he wished to see her, and saw her at her toilet laughing, and in a pleasant humour, with her women about her. Prince Ali wanted no other proof to be persuaded than this perspective glass was the most valuable thing in the world, and believed that he should neglect to purchase it, he should never meet again with such another rarity. He therefore took the crier with him to the khan where he lodged, and counted him out the money, and received the perspective glass. Prince Ali was overjoyed at his bargain, and persuaded himself that as his brothers would not be able to meet with anything so rare and admirable, the Princess Nouronihar would be the recompense of his fatigue and trouble, that he thought of nothing but visiting the court of Persia incognito, and seeing whatever was curious in Shiraz and thereabouts, till the caravan with which he came returned back to the Indies. As soon as the caravan was ready to set out, the prince joined them and arrived happily without any accident or trouble, otherwise than the length of the journey and fatigue of travelling, at the palace of the rendezvous, where he found Prince Hussein, and both waited for Prince Ahmed. Just checking where we are. Oh, good ways. Okay. Prince Ahmed, who took the road of Samarkand, anyway, the next day after his arrival there went, as his brothers had done, into the Bezestein, where he had not walked long, but heard a crier who had an artificial apple in his hand cry it at 35 purses. Oh, sorry. He heard a crier who had an artificial apple in his hand cry it at 35 purses, upon which he stopped the crier and said to him, let me see that apple, and tell me what virtue and extraordinary properties it has to be valued at so high a rate. Sir, said the crier, giving it into his hand, if you look at the outside of this apple, it is very worthless, but if you consider its properties, virtues, and the great use and benefit it is to mankind, you will say it is no price for it, and that he who possesses it is master of a great treasure. In short, it cures all sick persons of the most mortal diseases, and if the patient is dying... Hello, Angus Marble. Whoa. What are you saying, and what are you dropping into this? I like root beer and Pringles. What are you doing? Hello. What? I'm mildly lost, but I know that I was in another world a second ago, and my brain is kind of spun around. Where am I again? Oh, right. Okay. Right? Well, I definitely like root beer too. I think it's my favorite. I've had some people fight about which brands and such. I'll tell you, because you are a root beer connoisseur yourself there. The old-fashioned sarsaparillas, the most old, not as new and carbonated. I always thought the old ones were like so cool. Anyway, okay. Something about an apple curing people's illnesses, right? That's where we were at. It cures all sick persons of the most mortal diseases, and if the patient is dying, it will recover him immediately and restore him to perfect health. And this is done after the easiest manner in the world, which is by the patient's smelling the apple. If I may believe you, replied Prince Ahmed, the virtues of this apple are wonderful, and it is invaluable. But what ground have I, for all you tell me, to be persuaded of the truth of this matter? Sir, replied the crier, the thing is known, and averred? Averred? Oh, I'll have to check that word. I need to know that verb. Okay. And averred by the whole city of Samarkand. Totally mixed up those sounds. Samarkand. I don't know. But without going any further, ask all these merchants you see here and hear what they say. You will find several of them will tell you they had not been alive this day if they had not made use of this excellent remedy, that you may better comprehend what it is. I must tell you it is the fruit of the study and experiments of a celebrated philosopher of this city, who applied himself all his lifetime to the study and knowledge of the virtues of plants and minerals, and at last attained to this composition, by which he performed such surprising cures in this town as will never be forgot, but died suddenly himself before he could go apply his sovereign remedy, and left his wife and a great many young children behind him, in very indifferent circumstances, who, to support their family and provide for their children, is resolved to sell it. While the crier informed Prince Ahmed of the virtues of the artificial apple, a great many persons came about them and confirmed what he said, and one among the rest said he had a friend dangerously ill, whose life was despaired of, and that was a favorable opportunity to show Prince Ahmed the experiment, upon which Prince Ahmed told the crier he would give him 40 purses if he cured the sick person. The crier, who had orders to sell it at that price, said to Prince Ahmed, Come, sir, let us go and make the experiment, and the apple shall be yours, and I can assure you that it will always have the desired effect. In short, the experiment succeeded, and the prince, after he had counted out to the crier 40 purses, and he had delivered the apple to him, waited patiently for the first caravan that should return to the Indies, and arrived in perfect health at the inn where the princes Hussein and Ali waited for him. When the princes met, they showed each of their treasures, and immediately saw through the glass that the princess was dying. They then sat down on the carpet, wished themselves to her, and were there in a moment. Prince Ahmed no sooner perceived himself in Nouronnihar's chamber than he rose off the tapestry, and did also the other 2 princes, and went to the bedside, and put the apple under her nose. Some moments after, the princess opened her eyes, and turned her head from one side to the other, looking at the persons who stood about her, and then rose up in the bed, and asked to be dressed, just as if she had waked out of a sound sleep. Her women having presently informed her in a manner that showed their joy that she was obliged to the 3 princes for their sudden recovery of her health, and particularly to Prince Ahmed, she immediately expressed her joy to see them, and thanked them all together, and afterward Prince Ahmed in particular. While the princess was dressing, the princes went to throw themselves at the sultan their father's feet, and pay their respects to him. But when they came before him, they found he had been informed of their arrival by the chief of the princess's eunuchs, and by what means the princess had been perfectly cured. The sultan received and embraced them with the greatest joy, both for their return and the recovery of the princess his niece, whom he loved as well as if she had been his own daughter, and who had been given over by the physicians. After the usual ceremonies and compliments, the princes presented each his rarity. Prince Hussein his tapestry, which he had taken care not to leave behind him in the princess's chamber. Prince Ali his ivory perspective glass, and Prince Ahmed his artificial apple. And after each had commended their present, they then put it into the sultan's hands. They begged of him to pronounce their fate, and declare to which of them he would give the Princess Nouronihar for a wife, according to his promise. The Sultan of the Indies, having heard without interrupting them all that the princes could represent further about their rarities, and being well informed of what had happened in relation to the Princess Nouronihar's cure, remained some time silent, as if he were thinking on what answer he should make. At last he broke the silence and said to them, I would declare for one of you children with a great deal of pleasure if I could do it with justice, but consider whether I can do it or no. 'Tis true, Prince Ahmed, the princess my niece is obliged to your artificial apple for her cure, but I must ask you whether or no you could have been so serviceable to her if you had not known by Prince Ali's perspective glass the danger she was in, and if Prince Hussein's tapestry had not brought you so soon. Your perspective glass, Prince Ali, informed you and your brothers that you were like to lose the princess your cousin. There you must own a great obligation. You must also grant that that knowledge would have been of no service without the artificial apple and the tapestry. And lastly, Prince Hussein, the princess, would be very ungrateful if she should not show her acknowledgment of the service of your tapestry, which was so necessary a means towards her cure. But consider it would have been of little use if you had not been acquainted with the princess's illness by Prince Ali's glass, and Prince Ahmed had not applied his artificial apple. Therefore, as neither tapestry, ivory perspective glass, nor artificial apple have the least preference one before the other, but on the contrary, there's a perfect equality, I cannot grant the princess to ally one of you, and the only fruit you have reaped from your travels is the glory of having equally contributed to restore her health. If all this be true, added the Sultan, you see that I must have recourse to other means to determine certainly in the choice I ought to make among you, and that, as there is time enough between this and night, I'll do it today. Go and get each of you a bow and arrow, and repair to the great plain, where they exercise horses. I'll soon come to you, and declare I will give the Princess Nouronihar to him that shoots the farthest. The three princes had nothing to say against the decision of the Sultan. When they were out of his presence, they each provided themselves with a bow and arrow, which they delivered to one of their officers, and went to the plain appointed, followed by a great concourse of people. The Sultan did not make them wait long for him, and as soon as he arrived, Prince Hussein, as the eldest, took his bow and arrow and shot first. Prince Ali shot next, and much beyond him, and Prince Ahmed last of all, but it so happened that nobody could see where his arrow fell, and notwithstanding all the diligence that was used by himself and everybody else, it was not to be found far or near, and though it was believed that he shot the farthest, and that he therefore deserved the Princess Nouronihar, It was, however, necessary that his arrow should be found to make the matter more evident and certain, and notwithstanding his remonstrance, I don't know that one either. The Sultan judged in favor of Prince Ali, gave orders for preparations to be made for the wedding, which was celebrated a few days after with great magnificence. Prince Hussein would not honor the feast with his presence. In short, his grief was too violent and insupportable that he left the court and renounced all right of succession to the crown to turn hermit. Prince Ahmed, too, did not come to Prince Ali and the Princess Naranahar's wedding any more than his brother Hussein, but did not renounce the world as he had done. But as he could not imagine what had become of his arrow, he stole away from his attendants and resolved to search after it, that he might not have anything to reproach himself with. With this intent he went to the place where the Princes Hussein and Ali's were gathered up, so where their arrows went, and going straight forward from there, looking carefully on both sides of him, he went so far, at last he began to think his labor was all in vain, but yet he could not help going forward till he came to some steep craggy rocks, which were bounds to his journey, and were situated in a barren country about 4 leagues distant from where he set out. Alright, there's a second, there's 2 Roman numerals there, and so I think that's a separate section. And I'm checking if there's any other separations. No, that's just part 1 done, and that was part 2. So, since it's broken it up right there, I will take the break here for a minute to just stretch. Since I have my broken chair, which, okay, I will do this. Boop, 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 goes down. It reminds me that I did set up my throne wish list now, and I have put a chair on there since I don't even know how I broke the chair. The arm on one side came out, and it looked like the metal had been like bent and ripped, and yet it had come out of a spot that only was like seat stuffing. It doesn't make sense. I don't understand it physically how it happened, but it is. That chair is dead, and I need a new one because this one I'm on is not good for streaming. But I put that up because Vi has recommended that I do that and mention it. I am mentioning, but that's all I'll say on it. And now, I'll take the second to break and get away from this evil chair. Good timing, Devin. Psyduck, I'm just coming back. Okay. I feel like that Psyduck has now become like a summoning. You usually do drop it when I'm here and not when I'm away. Alright. Ooh. There we go. We go back, and now we are at part 2. So, Prince Ahmed is looking for his arrow, and he's traveled a ridiculously long way into a place that looks totally different than where he was from. So, if this is where his arrow is, he sure shot real fucking far. Alright. When Prince Ahmed came pretty nigh to these rocks, he perceived an arrow, which he gathered up, looked earnestly at, and was in the greatest astonishment to find it was the same he shot away. Certainly, said he to himself, neither I nor any man living could shoot an arrow so far. If that's really what you thought, why did you walk that way? Okay. And finding it laid flat, not sticking into the ground, he judged that it rebounded against the rock. There must be some mystery in this, said he to himself again, and it may be advantageous to me. Perhaps fortune, to make me amends for depriving me of what I thought the greatest happiness, may have reserved a greater blessing for my comfort. That's a pretty positive view on things. Hey, I didn't get what I want. Perhaps that's because there's going to be something greater. The guy's really positive. What? Nothing happened. What? Huh? Nothing happened when he found the arrow? Well, not yet. I'm getting there. We still have a fairy to meet. That's in the title. He's probably finding the fairy in this. Okay. I will sort out what you mean later, you riddle. Okay. As these rocks were full of caves, and some of those caves were deep, the prince entered into one, and looking about, cast his eyes on an iron door, which seemed to have no lock, but he feared it was fastened. However, thrusting against it, it opened, and discovered an easy descent, but no steps, which he walked down with his arrow in his hand. At first he thought he was going into a dark, obscure place, but presently a quite different light succeeded that which he came out of, and entering into a large, spacious place, at about 50 or 60 paces distant, he perceived a magnificent palace, which he had not then time enough to look at. At the same time, a lady of majestic port and air advanced as far as the porch, attended by a large troop of ladies so finely dressed and beautiful that it was difficult to distinguish which was the mistress. As soon as Prince Ahmed perceived the lady, he made all imaginable haste to go and pay his respects, and the lady, on her part, seeing him coming, prevented him from addressing his discourse to her first, but said to him, "Come nearer, Prince Ahmed, you are welcome." It was no small surprise to the prince to hear himself named in a place he had never heard of, though so nigh to his father's capital, and he could not comprehend how he should be known to a lady who was a stranger to him. At first he returned the lady's compliment by throwing himself at her feet, and rising up again, said to her, "Madam, I return you 1,000 thanks for the assurance you give me of welcome to a place where I believed my imprudent curiosity had made me penetrate too far. But, madam, may I, without being guilty of ill manners, dare to ask you by what adventure you know me, and how you, who live in the same neighborhood with me, should be so great a stranger to me?" "Prince," said the lady, "let us go into the hall. There I will gratify you in your request." After these words, the lady led Prince Ahmed into the hall. Then he sat down on a sofa, and when the prince, led by her entreaty, had when the prince, by her entreaty, had done the same, she said, "You are surprised, you say, that I should know you and not be known by you. But you will be no longer surprised when I inform you who I am. You are undoubtedly sensible that your religion teaches you to believe that the world is inhabited by genies as well as men. I am the daughter of one of the most powerful and distinguished genies, and my name is Paribanou." Let's hope that that is the pronunciation I should be using. "The only thing that I have to add is that you seem to be worthy of a more happy fate than that of possessing the Princess Nouronihar, and that you might attain to it. I was present when you drew your arrow, and foresaw it would not go beyond Prince Hussein's. I took it in the air, and gave it the necessary motion to strike against the rocks near which you found it, and I tell you that it lies in your power to make use of the favorable opportunity which presents itself to make you happy." As the fairy Paribanou pronounced these last words with a different tone, and looked at the same time tenderly upon Prince Ahmed, with a modest blush on her cheeks, it was no hard matter for the prince to comprehend what happiness she meant. Okay. He presently considered that the Princess Nouronihar could never be his, and that the fairy Paribanou excelled her infinitely in beauty, agreeableness, wit, and as much as he could conjecture by the magnificence of this palace, in immense riches. He blessed the moment that he thought of seeking after his arrow a second time. Yeah, I would too. And yielding to his love, "Madam," replied he, "should I all my life have the happiness of being your slave, and the admirer of the many charms which ravish my soul, I should think myself the most blessed of men. Pardon me in the boldness which inspires me to ask this favor, and don't refuse to admit me into your court, a prince who is entirely devoted to you." Look at these two flirty little... We don't often get the romantic leads in these stories actually like just flirting with each other, or just actually talking to each other. It's so much more like the storyteller says that they like each other. The storyteller says that this person's amazing and that they want each other. Get a room. Yeah, this is I think it is the first time in our things where they just actually talk to each other and say, "Hey." Brows bouncing. Okay. "Prince," answered the fairy, "will you not pledge your faith to me as well as I give mine to you?" "Yes, madam," replied the prince in an ecstasy of joy. it's a little early, yeah. That makes me wonder. I think what I'll do tomorrow is I'll read a couple of the previous stories I've read, maybe, because we did have a Cupid story, but it was weird. Maybe I'll read that one over again is what I'll do, but I don't know about the rest. Anyway, okay. Oh, I could do specific Saint Valentine stories, maybe, and then find like cryptid on Cupids. I don't know. Okay. "Whatever, Prince," answered the fairy, "will you not pledge your faith to me as well as I give mine to you?" "Yes, madam," replied the prince in an ecstasy of joy. "What can I do better, and with greater measure? Yes, my sultaness, my queen, I'll give you my heart without the least reserve." "Then," answered the fairy, "you are my husband and I am your wife." That's that, I guess. "But, as I suppose," pursued she, "that you have eaten nothing today, a slight repast shall be served up for you, while preparations are making for our wedding feast at night, and then I will show you the apartments of my palace, and you shall judge if this hall is not the meanest part of it." Deaf Noah, don't kill Cupid. It's coming to the point where I have this thought in my head that Deaf Noah's just, that little Psyduck is gonna kill everybody in the chat. It's like, don't do that. Kind of swiper, no swipey vibe. Not very serious. What? What are you talking about? Oh no. You? Never. But now we've got a rival murder rubber duck, which I gotta say has more production value. Look at the animation on him. Just admit it. Fight, you little ducks. Okay, I need to stop. Although I should tell you, I have crocheted a murder duck, a murder chicken, as I've nicknamed him. And it is a gift for a friend when I go up north on my trip, and I'll be giving it to the friend. So I have myself a little murder duck like you guys have. Maybe I'll drop it in photos next time. Next stream, I mean. Okay, what am I doing? They're flirting like hell. And she says that I'll give you some food. Okay, I will show you the apartments of my palace, and you shall judge if this hall is not the meanest part of it. Some of the fairies' women who came into the hall with them and guessed her intentions went immediately out and returned presently with some excellent meats and wines. When Prince Ahmed had ate and drunk as much as he cared for, the fairy Paribanou carried him through all the apartments, where he saw diamonds, rubies, emeralds, and all sorts of fine jewels, intermixed with pearls, agate, jasper, porphyry, and all sorts of the most precious marbles, but not to mention the richness of the furniture, which was inestimable. Sorry, things moving. There was such a profuseness throughout that the prince, instead of ever having seen anything like it, owned that he could not have imagined there was anything in the world that could come up to it. Sorry, it's the page following the lines was wrong. Okay. Prince, said the fairy, if you admire my palace so much, which indeed is very beautiful, what would you say to the palaces of the chief of our genies, which are much more beautiful, spacious, and magnificent? I could also charm you with my gardens, but we will let that alone till another time. Night draws near, and it will be time to go to supper. The next hall, which the fairy led the prince into, and where the cloth was laid for the feast, was the last apartment the prince had not seen, and not in the least inferior to the others. At his entrance into it, he admired the infinite number of sconces of wax candles perfumed with amber, the multitude of which, instead of being confused, were placed with so just a symmetry as formed an agreeable and pleasant sight. A large side table was set out with all sorts of gold plate, so finely wrought that the workmanship was much more valuable than the weight of the gold. Several choruses of beautiful women richly dressed, and whose voices were ravishing, began a concert, accompanied with all sorts of the most harmonious instruments, and when they were set down at the table, the fairy Paribanou took care to help Prince Ahmed to the most delicate meats, which she named as she invited him to eat of them, and which the prince found to be so exquisitely nice that he commended them with exaggeration, and said that the entertainment far surpassed those of a man. He found also the same excellence in the wines, which neither he nor the fairy tasted of till the dessert was served up, which consisted of the choicest sweetmeats and fruits. The wedding feast was continued the next day. or rather the days following the celebration, were a continual feast. At the end of 6 months, Prince Ahmed, who always loved and honored the Sultan his father, conceived a great desire to know how he was, and that desire could not be satisfied without going to see. He told the fairy of it and desired she would give him leave. I'm wondering, 6 months you've been gone and you had left. I don't think he even told anybody he was looking for the arrow. He just was not going to the wedding. And then he was gone for 6 months. They probably assumed some of the worst things. Okay. Prince, said she, go when you please. But first, don't take it amiss that I give you some advice how you shall behave yourself where you are going. First, I don't think it proper for you to tell the Sultan your father of our marriage, nor of my quality, nor the place where you have been. Beg of him to be satisfied in knowing you are happy, and desire no more. And let him know that the sole end of your visit is to make him easy and inform him of your fate. She appointed 20 gentlemen and mounted and equipped to attend him. When all was ready, Prince Ahmed took his leave of the fairy, embraced her, and renewed his promise to return soon. Then his horse, which was most finely caparisoned, and was as beautiful a creature as any in the Sultan of Indy's stables, was led to him, and he mounted him with an extraordinary grace. And, after he had bid her last adieu, set forward on his journey. Okay. As it was not a great way to his father's capital, Prince Ahmed soon arrived there. The people, glad to see him again, received him with acclamations of joy, and followed him in crowds to the Sultan's apartment. The Sultan received and embraced him with great joy, complaining at the same time, with a fatherly tenderness, of the affliction that his long absence had been to him, which he said was the more grievous for that, fortune having decided in favor of Prince Ali's brother, he was afraid he might have committed some rash action. I believe he is referring to unaliving himself. The prince told a story of his adventures without speaking of the fairy, whom he said that he must not mention, and ended, the only favor I ask of your majesty is to give me leave to come often and pay you my respects, and to know how you do. Son, answered the Sultan of the Indies, I cannot refuse you the leave you ask me, but I should much rather you would resolve to stay with me. At least tell me where I may send to you if you should fail to come, or when I may think your presence necessary. Sir, replied Prince Ahmed, what your majesty asks of me is part of the mystery I spoke to your majesty of. I beg of you to give me leave to remain silent on this head, for I shall come so frequently that I am afraid that I shall sooner be thought troublesome than be accused of negligence in my duty. The Sultan of the Indies pressed Prince Ahmed no more, but said to him, Son, I penetrate no farther into your secrets, but leave you at your liberty, but can tell you that you could not do me a greater pleasure than to come, and by your presence restore to me the joy I have not felt this long time, that you shall always be welcome when you come, without interrupting your business or pleasure. Prince Ahmed stayed but 3 days at the Sultan his father's court, and the 4th returned to the fairy Paribanou, who did not expect him so soon. A month after the Prince Ahmed's return from paying a visit to his father, as the fairy Paribanou had observed that the prince, since the time he gave her an account of his journey, his discourse of his father, and the leave he asked to go and see him often, had never talked of the Sultan, as if there had been no such person in the world, whereas before he was always speaking of him. She thought he forbore on her account, Therefore she took an opportunity to say to him one day, "Prince, tell me, have you forgot the Sultan your father? Don't you remember the promise you made to go and see him often? For my part, I have not forgot what you told me at your return, and so put you in mind of it, that you may not be long before you acquit yourself of your promise." So Prince Ahmed went the next morning with the same attendants as before, but much finer, and himself more magnificently mounted, equipped, and dressed, and was received by the Sultan with the same joy and satisfaction. For several months he constantly paid his visits, always in a richer and finer equipage. At last some viziers of the Sultan's favourites, who judged of Prince Ahmed's grandeur and power by the figure he cut, made the Sultan jealous of his son, saying it was to be feared he might inveigle himself into the people's favour and dethrone him. The Sultan of the Indies was so far from thinking that Prince Ahmed could be capable of so pernicious a design, as his favourites would make him believe, that he said to them, "You are mistaken. My son loves me, and I am certain of his tenderness and fidelity, as I have given him no reason to be disgusted." But the favourites went on abusing Prince Ahmed till the Sultan said, "Be it as it will. I don't believe my son Ahmed is so wicked as you would persuade me he is. However, I am obliged to you for your good advice, and don't dispute that it proceeds from your good intentions." The Sultan of the Indies said this, that his favourites might not know the impressions of their discourse had made on his mind, which had so alarmed him that he resolved to have Prince Ahmed watched unknown to his grand vizier. So he went for a female magician, who was introduced by a back door into his apartment. "Go immediately," he said, "and follow my son, and watch him so well as to find out where he retires, and bring me word." The magician left the Sultan, and knowing the place where Prince Ahmed found his arrow, went immediately thither, and hid herself near the rock so that nobody could see her. The next morning Prince Ahmed set out by daybreak, without taking leave either of the Sultan or any of his court, according to custom. The magician, seeing him coming, followed him with her eyes, till on a sudden she lost sight of him and his attendants. As the rocks were very steep and craggy, there were an insurmountable barrier, so that the magician judged that there were put two things for it, either that the prince retired into some cavern, or an abode of genies or fairies. "Ding, ding, ding, lady, you got it." Thereupon she came out of the place where she hid, and went directly to the hollow way, which she traced till she came to the farther end, looking carefully about on all sides, but, notwithstanding all her diligence, could perceive no opening, not so much as the iron gate which Prince Ahmed discovered, which was to be seen and opened to none but men, and only to such whose presence was agreeable to the fairy Paribanou. "Only men can open this door? That's rude." Okay. The magician who saw it was in vain for her to search any farther. Was obliged to be satisfied with the discovery she had made, and returned to give the Sultan an account. The Sultan was very well pleased with the magician's conduct, and said to her, "Do as you think fit. I'll wait patiently the event of your promises," and to encourage her made a present of a diamond of great value. The Prince Ahmed had obtained the fairy Paribanou's leave to go to the Sultan of the Indies' court once a month. He never failed, and the magician, knowing the time, went a day or two before to the foot of the rock, where she lost sight of the prince and his attendants, and waited there. The next morning Prince Ahmed went out, as usual, at the iron gate, with the same attendants as before, and passed by the magician, whom he knew not to be such, and seeing her lie with her head against the rock, and complaining as if she were in great pain, he pitied her, turned his horse about, went to her and asked her what was the matter with her and what he could do to ease her. The artful sorceress looked at the prince in a pitiful manner, without ever lifting up her head, and answered in broken words and sighs, as if she could hardly fetch her breath, that she was going to the capital city, but on the way thither she was taken with so violent a fever that her strength had failed her, and she was forced to lay down where he saw her, far from any habitation and without any hopes of assistance. "Good woman," replied Prince Ahmed, "you are not so far from help as you imagine. I am ready to assist you and convey you where you will meet with a speedy cure. Only get up and let one of my people take you behind him." At these words the magician, who pretended sickness only to know where the prince lived and what he did, refused not the charitable offer he made her, and that her actions might correspond with her words, she made many pretended vain endeavors to get up. At the same time, two of the prince's attendants, alighting off their horses, helped her up and set her behind another, and mounted their horses again, and followed the prince, who turned back to the iron gate, which was opened by one of his retinue who rode before. And when he came into the outward court of the fairy, without dismounting himself, he sent to tell her he wanted to speak with her. The fairy Paribanou came with all imaginable haste, not knowing what made Prince Ahmed return so soon, who, not giving her time to ask him the reason, said, "Princess, I desire you would have compassion on this good woman," pointing to the magician, who was held up by two of his retinue. "I found her in the condition you see her in, and promised her the assistance she stands in need of, and am persuaded that you, out of your own goodness as well as upon my entreaty, will not abandon her." The fairy Paribanou, who had her eyes fixed upon the pretended sick woman all the time that the prince was talking to her, ordered two of her women who followed her to take her from the two men that held her, and carry her into an apartment of the palace, and take as much care of her as she would herself. While the two women executed the fairy's commands, she went up to Prince Ahmed and, whispering in his ear, said, "Prince, this woman is not so sick as she pretends to be, and I am very much mistaken if she is not an impostor, who will be the cause of a great trouble to you. But don't be concerned. Let what will be devised against you be persuaded that I will deliver you out of all the snares that shall be laid for you. Go and pursue your journey." The discourse of the fairies did not in the least frighten Prince Ahmed. "My princess," said he, "as I do not remember I ever did or designed anybody an injury, I cannot believe anybody can have a thought of doing me one. But if they have, I shall not, nevertheless, forbear doing good whenever I have an opportunity." Then he went back to his father's palace. In the meantime, the two women carried the magician into a very fine apartment, richly furnished. First they sat her down upon a sofa, with her back supported with a cushion of gold brocade, while they made a bed on the same sofa before her, the quilt of which was finely embroidered with silk, the sheets of the finest linen, and the coverlet cloth of gold. When they had put her into bed, for the old sorceress pretended that her fever was so violent she could not help herself in the least, one of the women went out, and returned soon again with a china dish in her hand full of a certain liquor, which she presented to the magician, while the other held her to sit up. "Drink this liquor," said she. "It is the water of the Fountain of Lions, and a sovereign remedy against all fevers whatsoever. You will find the effect of it in less than an hour's time." The magician, to dissemble the better, took it after a great deal of entreaty, but at last she took the china dish, and holding back her head, swallowed down the liquor. When she was laid down again, the two women covered her up. "Lie quiet," said she who brought the china cup, "and get a little sleep if you can. We'll leave you, and hope to find you perfectly cured when we come back again in an hour hence." The two women came again at the time they said they would, and found the magician up and dressed and sitting upon the sofa. "Oh, admirable potions," he said. "It has wrought its cure much sooner than you told me it would, and I shall be able to prosecute my journey." The two women, who were fairies as well as their mistress, after they had told the magician how glad they were that she was cured so soon, talked before her and conducted her through several apartments, all more noble than that wherein she lay, into a large hall, the most richly and magnificently furnished of all the palace. Fairy Paribanou sat in this hall on a throne of massive gold, enriched with diamonds, rubies, and pearls of an extraordinary size, and attended on each hand by a number of beautiful fairies, all richly clothed. At the sight of so much majesty, the magician was not only dazzled, but was so amazed that, after she had prostrated herself before the throne, she could not open her lips to thank the fairy as she proposed. However, Paribanou saved her the trouble, and said to her, "Good woman, I am glad I had an opportunity to oblige you, and to see you are able to pursue your journey. I won't detain you, but perhaps you may not be displeased to see my palace. Follow my women, and they will show it to you." Then the magician went back and related to the Sultan of the Indies all that had happened, and how very rich Prince Ahmed was since his marriage with the fairy, richer than all the kings in the world, and how there was danger that he should come and take the throne from his father. Okay, I was really expecting the fairies to actually hurt her in the end and make sure she didn't go back to the Sultan, but okay. Though the Sultan of the Indies was very well persuaded that Prince Ahmed's natural disposition was good, yet he could not help being concerned at the discourse of the old sorceress, to whom, when she was taking her leave, he said, "I thank thee for the pains thou hast taken, and thy wholesome advice. I am so sensible of the great importance it is to me that I shall deliberate upon it in council." Now the favorites advised that the prince should be killed, but the magician advised differently. "Make him give you all kinds of wonderful things by the fairy's help, till she tires of him and sends him away. As for example, every time your majesty goes into the field, you are obliged to be at a great expense, not only in pavilions and tents for your army, but likewise in mules and camels to carry their baggage. Now, might you not engage him to use his interest with the fairy to procure you a tent, which might be carried in a man's hand, and which should be so large as to shelter your whole army against bad weather?" When the magician had finished her speech, the Sultan asked his favorites if they had anything better to propose, and finding them all silent, determined to follow the magician's advice, as the most reasonable and most agreeable of his mild government. Next day, the Sultan did as the magician had advised him and asked for the pavilion. Prince Ahmed never expected that the Sultan his father would have asked such a thing, which at first appeared so difficult, not to say impossible. Though he knew not absolutely how great the power of genies and fairies was, he doubted whether it extended so far as to encompass such a tent as his father desired. At last he replied, "Though it is with greatest reluctance imaginable, I will not fail to ask the favor of my wife your majesty desires, but will not promise you to obtain it, and if I should not have the honor to come again to pay you with my respects, that shall be the sign that I have not had success. But beforehand, I desire you to forgive me and consider that you yourself have reduced me to this extremity." "Son," replied the Sultan of the Indies, "I should be very sorry if what I ask of you should cause me the displeasure of never seeing you more. I find you don't know the power a husband has over a wife, and yours would show that her love to you is very indifferent if she, with the power she has as a fairy, should refuse you so trifling a request as this I desire you to ask of her for my sake." The prince went back and was very sad for fear of offending the fairy. She kept pressing him to tell her what was the matter, and at last he said, "Madam, you may have observed that hitherto I have been content with your love, and have never asked you any other favour. Consider then, I conjure you, that is not I, but the Sultan my father, who indiscreetly, or at least I think so, begs of you a pavilion large enough to shelter him, his court, and army from the violence of the weather, and which a man can carry in his hand. But remember, it is the Sultan my father asks this favour." "Prince," replied the fairy, smiling, "I am sorry that so small a matter should disturb you, and make you so uneasy as you appeared to me." Then the fairy sent for her treasurer, to whom when she came she said, "Nourgihan," which was her name, "bring me the largest pavilion in my treasury." Nourgihan returned presently with the pavilion, which she could not only hold in her hand, but in the palm of her hand when she shut her fingers, and presented it to her mistress, who gave it to Prince Ahmed to look at. When Prince Ahmed saw the pavilion, which the fairy called the largest in her treasury, he fancied she had a mind to jest with him, and thereupon the marks of his surprise appeared presently in his countenance, which Paribanou perceived, burst out laughing. "What, Prince," cried she, "do you think I jest with you? You'll see presently that I am in earnest. Nourgihan," they spelt this fairy's name differently, literally every time, ending with an N, then an M, then an N again. Said she to her treasurer, taking the tent out of Prince Ahmed's hands, "Go and set it up, that the prince may judge whether it may be large enough for the Sultan's father." The treasurer went immediately with it out of the palace and carried it a great way off, and when she had it set up, one end reached to the very palace, at which time the prince, thinking it small, found it large enough to shelter two greater armies than that of the Sultan his father's, and then said to Paribanou, "I ask my princess 1,000 pardons for my incredulity. After what I have seen, I believe there is nothing impossible to you." "You see," said the fairy, "that the pavilion is larger than what your father may have occasion for you must know that it has one property, that it is larger or smaller according to the army it is to cover." The treasurer took down the tent again and brought it to the prince, who took it, and without staying any longer than till the next day, mounted his horse and went with the same attendants to the Sultan his father. There's still so much left to the story, and I'm just surprised that all this started with the Sultan has a pretty niece, and his kids are like, "Yeah, I want to bang my cousin now." Oh no. We've come a long way. The Sultan... You missed the beginning? This whole story started with the Sultan having... The Sultan had the 3 sons, and also he was raising his niece, and all 3 of his sons wanted to get with their cousin, and so they all had to go through challenges, and it was the last step of the challenge where this fairy had stepped in, and then our Prince Ahmed met the fairy, and now all of this is happening. So that's how this all started. And we haven't heard about her since. Oh, it's so classic. Royalty and cousin loving. Okay. Gold responses, guys. Just gold. Okay. The Sultan, who was persuaded that there could not be any such thing as such a tent as he asked for, was in great surprise at the prince's diligence. Indeed, nothing is more royal than inbreeding. I was calling that out on a different stream. I forget which one. Anyway, okay. The Sultan, he took the tent, and after he had admired its smallness, his amazement was so great that he could not recover himself. When the tent was set up in the great plain which we have before mentioned, that's where he set out the arrow that did everything, he found it large enough to shelter an army twice as large as he could bring into the field. But the Sultan was not yet satisfied, because he's got to ruin this marriage for whatever reason. Son, said he, I have already expressed to you how much I am obliged to you for the present of the tent you have procured me, that I look upon it as the most valuable thing in all my treasury. But you must do one thing more for me, which will be every whit as agreeable to me. I am informed that the fairy, your spouse, makes use of a certain water, called the water of the Fountain of Lions, which cures all sorts of fevers, even the most dangerous, and as I am perfectly well persuaded my health is dear to you, I don't doubt but you will ask her for a bottle of that water for me, and bring it to me as a sovereign medicine, which I may make use of when I have occasion. Do this other important piece of service, and thereby complete the duty of a good son toward a tender father. The other brothers don't have to do this, but also, I'm hoping that this water of the Fountain of the Lions that the fairies gave that sorcerer was just water, because I had originally thought that they were gonna fuck up that sorceress or imprison her or something. Yeah. Ugh, so much manipulating here. I'm hoping that they really did only just give her water or something, because she didn't even have a fever, and they knew that. Ahmed is the youngest brother. The middle brother got the cousin for a wife, and the eldest just didn't quite measure up on either of these things. He skipped out of the wedding, and we haven't heard about him since. And considering the king thought that Ahmed had maybe unalived himself when he disappeared for 6 months, I wonder if that's what happened to Prince Hussein, the eldest. But I don't know. Yeah, you care about my health, surely, so do this amazing thing for me. And I love the Hello Kitty. Okay. Here we go. The prince returned and told the fairy what his father had said. There's a great deal of wickedness in this demand, she answered, as you will understand by what I am going to tell you. The Fountain of Lions is situated in the middle of a court with a great castle, the entrance into which is guarded by 4 fierce lions. So it is real, and it makes sense that it's called that, with the lions, 2 of which sleep alternately, while the other 2 are awake. But don't let that frighten you. I'll give you means to pass by them without any danger. Okay, so we are going to go for it. But she's also making her husband go through all that trouble. She's not doing it. She's not just handing it to him. She's like, okay, well then go get it. Alright. The fairy Paribanou was at the same time very hard at work, and, as she had several clues of thread by her, she took up one, and presenting it to Prince Ahmed, said, First take this clue of thread. I'll tell you presently the use of it. In the second place, you must have 2 horses. One you must ride yourself, and the other you must lead, which must be loaded with a sheep cut into 4 quarters that must be killed today. In the third place, you must be provided with a bottle, which I will give you, to bring the water in. Set out early tomorrow morning, and when you have passed the iron gate, throw the clue of thread before you, which will roll till it comes to the gates of the castle. Follow it, and when it stops, as the gates will open, you will see the 4 lions. The 2 that are awake will, by their roaring, wake the other 2, but don't be frightened. But throw each of them a quarter of mutton, and then clap spurs to your horse and ride to the fountain. Fill your bottle without alighting, and then return with the same expedition. The lions will be so busy eating that they will let you pass by them. Okay, cool. Prince Ahmed set out the next morning at the time appointed by the fairy, and followed her directions exactly. When he arrived at the gates of the castle, he distributed the quarters of mutton among the 4 lions, and passing through the midst of them bravely, got to the fountain, filled his bottle, and returned back as safe and sound as he went. When he had gone a little distance from the castle gates, he turned him about, perceiving 2 of the lions coming after him. He drew his saber and prepared himself for defense, but as he went forward he saw one of them turned out of the road at some distance, and showed by his head and tail that he did not come to do him any harm, but only to go before him, and that the other stayed behind to follow, but he put his sword up again in its scabbard. Guarded in this manner, he arrived at the capital of the Indies, but the lions never left him till they had conducted him to the gates of the Sultan's palace. What are these lions up to? After which they returned the same way whence they came, though not without frightening all that saw them, for all they went in a very gentle manner and showed no fierceness. Okay, so they just followed along to show off that this prince is pretty cool, I guess. A great many officers, or maybe they were following him for more mutton. Like, hey, you got any more of that stuff? That was pretty good. Anyway, a great many officers came to attend the prince while he dismounted his horse, and afterward conducted him into the Sultan's apartment, who was at that time surrounded with his favorites. He approached toward the throne, laid the bottle at the Sultan's feet, and kissed the rich tapestry which covered his footstool. That's pretty good. Yeah. He put the water at his footstool and then said, I have brought you, sir, the healthful water which your majesty desired so much to keep among your other rarities in your treasury, but at the same time wish you such extraordinary health as never to have occasion to make use of it. Yeah, so I guess the rich tapestry on his footstool is probably the tapestry Prince Hussein brought him, which is like a magic carpet that takes him wherever he wishes. He has already a bunch of really cool things. He does not need all these more awesome fairy gifts, but yeah. Okay. After the prince had made an end of his compliment, the Sultan placed him on his right hand and then said to him, Son, I am very much obliged to you for this valuable present, as also for the great danger you have exposed yourself to upon my account, which I have been informed by a magician who knows the Fountain of Lions. But do me the pleasure, continued he, to inform me by what incredible power you have been secured. Sir, replied Prince Ahmed, I have no share in the compliment your majesty is pleased to make me. All the honor is due to the fairy, my spouse, whose good advice I followed. Sorry, noisy chair. Yeah. Good Prince Ahmed giving credit to his wife. Okay. Then he informed the Sultan that what those directions were. Oh no, don't do that. Don't tell him to go back to the fountain. And by the relation of his expedition, let him know how well he had behaved himself. When he had done, the Sultan, who showed outwardly all the demonstrations of great joy, but secretly became more jealous, retired in an inward apartment, where he sent for the magician. This is not going to go well. The magician at her arrival saved the Sultan the trouble to tell her of the success of Prince Ahmed's journey, which she had heard of before she came, and therefore was prepared with an infallible means, as she pretended. This means she communicated to the Sultan, who declared it the next day to the prince in the midst of all his courtiers in these words. Son, said he, I have one more thing to ask of you, after which I shall expect nothing more from your obedience, nor your interest with your wife. This request is to bring me a man not above 1.5 feet high, and whose beard is 30 feet long, who carries a bar of iron upon his shoulders, of 500 weight, which he uses as a quarterstaff. This sounds like a very incredible person to meet. Okay. Prince Ahmed, who did not believe that there was such a man in the world as his father described, would gladly have excused himself, but the Sultan persisted in his demand and told him the fairy could do more incredible things. The next day the prince returned to his dear Paribanou, to whom he told his father's new demand, which, he said, he looked upon to be a thing more impossible than the two first. For, added he, I cannot imagine there can be such a man in the world. Without doubt, he has a mind to try whether or no I am so silly as to go about it, or he has a design on my ruin. In short, how can he suppose that I should lay hold of a man so well armed? Though he is but little, what arms can I make use of to reduce him to my will? If there are any means, I beg you will tell them, and let me come off with honor this time. Don't affright yourself, prince, replied the fairy. You can risk in fetching the water of the Fountain of Lions for your father, but there's no danger in finding out this man, who is my brother. Skybar? Shybar? I don't know. We'll say Shybar. But is so far from being like me, though we both had the same father, that he is of so violent a nature that nothing can prevent his giving cruel marks of his resentment for a light offense, yet on the other hand is so good as to oblige anyone in whatever they desire. He is made exactly as the Sultan your father has described him, and has no other arms than a bar of iron of 500 pounds weight, without which he never stirs, and which makes him respected. I'll send for him, and you shall judge of the truth of what I tell you, but be sure to prepare yourself against being frightened at his extraordinary figure when you see him. What? My queen, replied Prince Ahmed, do you say Shybar is your brother? Let him be never so ugly or deformed, I shall be so far from being frightened at the sight of him that, as our brother, I shall honor and love him. Prince Ahmed's kind of a goat. I like him a lot. He's flirty at the start. He's doing all the good things. Then he's just like, I don't care what he looks like, babe. He's your brother. I'll love him. Yes, you frickin' better. The fairy ordered a gold chafing dish to be set with a fire in it under the porch of her palace, with a box of the same metal which was a present to her, out of which, taking a perfume and throwing it into the fire, there arose a thick cloud of smoke. Based. Some moments after, the fairy said to Prince Ahmed, See, there comes my brother. There comes my brother. The prince immediately perceived Shybar coming gravely with his heavy bar on his shoulder, his long beard, which he held up before him, and a pair of thick mustachios. So he's mustachioed. Ooh. Oh no, wait. What are mustachios then? It says, which he tucked behind his ears and almost covered his face. I think it is still a mustache. It's just that it's so long he has to tuck behind his ears. And almost covered his face. His eyes were very small and deep set in his head, which was far from being of the smallest size. So he's got a big head. Oh no. And on his head he wore a grenadier's cap. Besides all this, he was very much humpbacked. Also humpbacked. Oh my goodness. Oh, it's fine, Cage Nightwind. Again, you never have any obligation to, do anything with my stuffs. It's all good. But, okay, go to bed pretty early and you can lurk a little bit for this. I think we're nearing, oh yeah, we're nearing the end of this. It was a very long story, but we'll be able to wrap it up soon enough. Okay, Shybar. He's got a whole bunch of stuff. Okay. And he's humpbacked. He's got a teeny tiny body, but not a terribly small head. And so he must look like a little bobblehead with just an impressive beard. And then, of course, the staff and the mustache with a beard. Anyway. If Prince... little heart. If Prince Ahmed had not known that Shaibar was Paribanou's brother, he would not have been able to have looked at him without fear. But knowing first who he was, he stood by the fairy without the least concern. See? Freaking awesome. Okay. Shaibar, as he came forward, looked at the prince so earnestly enough to have chilled his blood in his veins, and asked Paribanou, when he first accosted her, who that man was. I can kind of just imagine him being like, who's this? Just like a little gnome-looking man. To which she replied, he is my husband, brother. His name is Ahmed. He is son to the Sultan of the Indies. The reason why I did not invite you to my wedding was I was unwilling to divert you from an expedition you were engaged in, and from which I heard with pleasure you returned victorious, and so took the liberty now to call for you. At these words, Shaibar, looking on Prince Ahmed favorably, said, Is there anything else, sister, wherein I can serve him? It is enough for me that he is your husband to engage me to do for him whatever he desires. Another good bro. The Sultan, his father, replied Paribanou, has a curiosity to see you, and I desire he may be your guide to the Sultan's court. He needs but lead me the way, I'll follow him, said Shaibar. Brother, replied Paribanou, it is too late to go today. Therefore, stay till tomorrow morning, and in the meantime I'll inform you of all that has passed between the Sultan of the Indies and Prince Ahmed during our marriage. Okay, I think this is where the intrigue begins. This is where they make a plot. I hope it is. Where the fairy is finally going to be like, okay, I've had enough with my husband's dad being greedy and shitty. Okay. The next morning, after Shaibar had been informed of the affair, he and Prince Ahmed set out for the Sultan's court. When they arrived at the gates of the capital, the people no sooner saw Shaibar, but they ran and hid themselves. And some shut up their shops and locked themselves up in their houses, while others, flying, communicated their fear to all they met, who stayed not to look behind them, but ran too, insomuch that Shaibar and Prince Ahmed, as they went along, found the streets all desolate till they came to the palaces, where the porters, instead of keeping the gates, ran away too, so that the prince and Shaibar advanced without any obstacle to the council hall, where the Sultan was seated on his throne and giving audience. Here, likewise, the ushers, at the approach of Shaibar, abandoned their post and gave them free admittance. That must be an awful way to live. I'm very glad Ahmed was, friendly to Shaibar then. Shaibar went boldly and fiercely up to the throne without waiting to be presented by Prince Ahmed, and accosted the Sultan of the Indies in these words. Thou hast asked for me, said he. See, here I am. What wouldst thou have with me? The Sultan, instead of answering him, clapped his hands before his eyes to avoid the sight of so terrible an object. Frickin' rude. At which uncivil and rude reception Shaibar was so much provoked, after he had given him the trouble to come so far, that he instantly lifted up his iron bar and killed him before Prince Ahmed could intercede on his behalf. The fairy warned, if people do misplease Shaibar, he responds. He responds in kind and then a bit much. Prince Ahmed could not perceive. All that he could do was to prevent his killing the Grand Vizier, who sat not far from him, representing to him that he had always given the Sultan, his father, good advice. These are they, then, said Shaibar, who gave him bad. And as he pronounced these words, he killed all the other viziers and flattering favorites of the Sultan, who were Prince Ahmed's enemies. Every time he struck, he killed some or other, and none escaped, but they who were not so frightened as to stand, staring and gaping, and who saved themselves by flight. Okay, yeah, so anyone that ran away managed to live. And the one good vizier that Prince Ahmed knew was good. When this terrible execution was over, Shaibar came out of the council hall into the midst of the courtyard with the iron bar upon his shoulder, and looking hard at the Grand Vizier, who owed his life to Prince Ahmed, he said, I know here is a certain magician who is a greater enemy of my brother-in-law than all these base favorites I have chastised. Based favorites. Let the magician be brought to me presently. The Grand Vizier immediately sent for her, and as soon as she was brought, Shaibar said, at the time he fetched a stroke at her with his iron bar, Take the reward of thy pernicious counsel, and learn to feign sickness again. After this he said, This is not yet enough. I will use the whole town after the same manner if they do not immediately acknowledge Prince Ahmed, my brother-in-law, for their sultan and the sultan of the Indies. Then all that were there present made their air echo again with the repeated acclamations of Long life to Sultan Ahmed, and immediately after he was proclaimed through the whole town. Shaibar made him be clothed in the royal vestments, installed him on the throne, and after he had caused all to swear homage and fidelity to him, went and fetched his sister Paribanou, whom he brought with all the pomp and grandeur imaginable, and made her to be owned sultaness of the Indies. Everything that the previous sultan was fearing, because he was fearing and being nonsense. There you go. Hey, the cousin is back. As for Prince Ali and Princess Nuranahar, as they had no hand in the conspiracy against Prince Ahmed and knew nothing of any, Prince Ahmed assigned them a considerable province with its capital where they spent the rest of their lives. Afterwards he sent an officer to Prince Hussein to acquaint him with the change and make him an offer which province he liked best. But that prince thought himself so happy in his solitude that he bade the officer return the Sultan his brother thanks for the kindness he designed him, assuring him of his submission, and that the only favour he desired of him was to give him leave to live retired in the place he had made choice for his retreat. So then the other prince was like, no, it's okay, I'll just stay here. And the end, I guess. They lived as the Sultan and Sultaness. There you go. That was the story of Prince Ahmed and the fairy Paribanou. There you go. I have another couple short stories afterwards, but that one was pretty good. Another happily ever after, yes, well, assumedly, hopefully, for Prince Ahmed, considering. Hi! Yes, it's all pretty comfy over here. Thanks for saying hello, Violet. What have I done? Oh, Violet gave me the note to change the font colorings for the text, and I thought that everything was as it was before, just a little bit different, but I realized that it wasn't how I remembered making it. So thank you for the note. You can see that I changed the text to something a little differently. I hope it's more legible. Yes, okay. Go sleep, Death Noah, and good luck with getting up early. Thanks for joining so much. Always very, very appreciative of you. Okay. Can you read it better, Violet? Yeah, okay, great. Okay. Glad. Alright, what was I doing? I was typing out the next story title, which is The Black Bull of Norroway. Not Norway, but Norroway. Intriguing. Okay. Screwed up by his throne? How'd you do that? I'm only just learning that stuff. I found there's so much stuff in there. I was not expecting there to be like so many different things to order on there. And then of course there's the link to Amazon, which is endless. But yeah. Your Throne? Game of Thrones? I found a bug while looking for a joke item. Oh! The joke items are fun, but oh no, there's a bug. Watch out. I'm hoping that means that you literally send her a bug, because I've seen those things where people eat chocolate-covered bugs and things. I want to see you eat a bug, Violet. I dare you. Okay. Sorry to interrupt your things. I will let you guys talk your stuff, and I'll just get back to reading. The Black Bull of Norroway. Cute little hooded friend. That's a little ominous, Death Noah, but that's also your vibe, isn't it? Sometimes a little ominous. Okay. Oh, and this one starts. Oh no! This one I took a peep at last night. It is Old English writing and stuff. So this is going to be very hard to follow. So if people would like for me to just make sounds, then cool, I'll be making sounds. If people want to be able to understand what is happening, help me. I will do my best, but I know that there will be so much that I do not know, and so many words that I can guess at the sounds and what they might mean, but probably I don't know. Based on Scotland being named, I'm guessing that this is Scottish. That this is actually just Scottish, which people can sometimes misunderstand for being English with just like a weird spelling of things. I think this is actually Scottish. I was watching TikToks recently of someone that was teaching Old Scottish, and so Scotland forever. I'm not very good at immediately put on my Scottish accent, so I don't think I'll put that out. Oh, Drunk Cage Nightwind. Oh heck yeah. That was something that I found on Throne, and I will be putting up because I think I could probably have fun with some of you at some point where I have a drunk story times. And it would be, I'm sure, a very fun and ridiculous energy, but I think I would fail at being properly quiet. I would end up being absurdly loud at times, and you guys would hate me, I don't know. But I did see a nice rum on there, and I'm like, yeah, okay, if I do this, that's what I would list. I would list the nice rum. Okay. Wish me luck. We're going Scottish. Oh. Oh. No, I totally know sleep drunk. Sleep drunk and sleep high are such times. I don't know if it's totally worth it, but I could do my best. I would learn. I would do what I can. Okay. And many a hunting song they sung, and song of game and glee, then turned to plaintive strains their tongue of Scotland's love and lay. To wilder measures next they turn, the black bull of Norroway. Sudden the tapers ceased to burn, the minstrels ceased to play. The Count of Kildare by J. Leyden. Okay. In Norroway, lang syne, there lived a certain lady, and she had 3 doctors, spelt with a CH. The oldest of them, not oldest, aldest. Oh, I'll stop specifying the funny writing after this. I'm sorry. The oldest of them said to her mither, make me a bannock and roast me a collop, for I'm gone awa to seek my fortune. Her mither did say, and to the doctor gaed away to an old witch washerwife and telled her purpose. The old wife bade her stay that day and gang and look out o' her back door and see what she could see. She saw nocht the first day. The second day she did the same and saw nocht. On the third day she looked again and saw a coach and six coming along the road. She ran in and telled the old wife what she saw. A whale, quo' the old wife, yon's for you. Say they took her to the coach and galloped off. This is already such... Okay. The second doctor next says to her mither, Mither, make me a bannock and roast me a collop, for I'm gone awa to seek my fortune. Her mither did say, and awa she gaed to the old wife as her sister had done. On the third day she looked out o'er the back door and saw a coach and four coming along the road. A wheel, quo' the old wife, yon's for you. Say they took her in, and aff they set. I'm sure I could say this less awfully. This sounds like I'm trying to make fun of them, but I'm not. But I can't stop laughing at my failures with this. The third doctor says to her mither, Mither, make me a bannock, and roast me a collop, for I'm gone awa to seek my fortune. Her mither did say, and awa she gaed to the old witch wife. She bade her look out o'er her back door and see what she could see. She did say, and when she came back said she saw nocht. The second day she did the same and saw nocht. The third day she looked again, and on coming back to the old wife, she saw nocht but a muckle black bull coming roaring alang the road. A whale, quo' the old wife, yon's for you. On hearing this, she was next to distracted with grief and terror, but she was lifted up and set on his back, and awa they went. Okay, so we had the first, I think doctors is daughters. The first one, they go off to a witch washerwife, and she stays there, and she says, look out the back door for a couple days. Look, and what do you see? Then a coach and six, and then a coach and four, and then the third daughter, she just sees the black bull, and that's who takes her away. All right. They travelled, and on they travelled. They travelled, and on they travelled, till the lady grew faint wi' hunger. Eat out o' my right lug, says the black bull, and drink out my left lug, and set by your leavings. Say she did as he said, and was wonderfully refreshed, and lang they gaed, and sair they rade, till they came in sight o' a very big and bonny castle. Yonder we maun be this night, quo' the bull, which is quoth the bull, I think. For my auld brither lives yonder. And presently they were at the place. They lifted her aff his back, and took her in, and sent him away to a park for the night. In the morning, when they were brought to the bull hame, they took the lady into a fine shining parlour, and gave her a beautiful apple, telling her no to break it till she was in the greatest strait ever mortal was in the world, and that wad bring her aught. Again she was lifted on the bull's back, and after she had ridden far farer than I can tell. They came in sight o' a far bonnier castle, and far farther awa than the last. Says the bull till her, Yonder we maun be the night, for my second brither lives here yonder. And they were at the place directly. They lifted her down and took her in, and sent the bull to the field for the night. In the morning they took the lady to a fine and rich room, and gave her the finest pear she had ever seen, pear being the fruit spelling, bidding her not to break it till she was in the greatest strait ever mortal could be in, and that wad get her out of it, I guess. Again she was lifted and set on his back, and awa they went, and lang they gaed, and sair they rade, till they came in sight of the far biggest castle and far farthest aff they had yet seen. We maun be yonder the night, says the bull, for my young brither lives yonder, and they were there directly. They lifted her down, took her in, and sent the bull to the field for the night. In the morning they took her into a room, the finest of all, and gaed her a plum, telling her not to break it till she was in the greatest strait mortal could be in, and that wad get her out o't. Presently they brought hame to the bull, set the lady on his back, and awa they went. And aye they gaed, and on they rade, until they came to a dark and ugsome glen, where they stopped, and the lady lighted down. Says the bull to her, Here ye maun stay till I gang and fight the Dale. I don't know if that means devil or not, but Dale. Ye maun sit yourself on that stane, and move neither hand nor foot till I come back, else I'll never find ye again. Good morning. We're in the middle of a Scottish, it seems, tale, and I mean that half these words are written in Scottish. So forgive the half stepping into accents because you can't say some of these words without it. Okay. And if everything round about he turns blue, I hae baited the dale. I hae beated the dale, but should a things turn red, he'll hae conquered me. She set her sail down on the stane, and by around her turned blue. O'ercome wi' joy, she lifted the it and crossed it o'er the ither. Sae glad was she that her companion was victorious. They're Scottish words. If you can't tell what's going on, welcome. Join the rest of us. I'm pretty sure I'm following all right. All right. Good night, Cage Nightwind. Absolutely, you got it. The bull returned and sought for her, but never could find her. Wait, did she get up? What? Okay. Here ye must stay. So he says stay while I fight the Dale. It's a bit of a struggle. Stay on the stone, move neither hand. Oh, okay. So he did move a bit, and now she did move a bit, and now the bull can't find her. Damn. Lang she sat, and aye she grat, till she wearied. At last she rase and gaed away. She kedna whar till. On she wandered till she came to a great hill o' glass that she tried as she could to climb, but wasna able. Round the bottom o' the hill she gaed, sobbing and seeking a passage o'er, till at last she came to a smith's house, and the smith promised, if she wad serve him 7 years, he wad make her iron shoon, wherewith she could climb o'er the glassy hill. At 7 years' end she got her iron shoon, clamb the glassy hill, and chanced to come to the old washerwife's habitation. There she was telled of a gallant young knight that had given in. Then she said to her doctor, what? Valiant given in. No, given in some bloody sarks to wash. Bloody sarks? Bloody socks? I don't know. And wherever washed thy sarks was, and where washed thy socks was to be his wife. The old wife had washed till she was tired, and they could na. And then she said to her doctor and Baith washed, and they better washed in hopes of getting the young knight, but they could do, they could na bring out the stain. At last they set the stranger damosel to work. And whenever she began, the stains came out pure and clean. But the old wife made the knight believe it was her doctor had washed the sarks. So the knight and the eldest doctor were to be married, but the stranger damosel was distracted at the thought of it, for she was deeply in love with him. So she bethought her of her apple, and breaking it, found it filled with gold and precious jewelry, the richest she had ever seen. See, this is weird. That sentence had ever, but we've been seeing air and stuff. Oh my gosh. This is a jumble of translation. Clearly some people knew what they were doing with translating, and then they were like, no, I don't know that at all. All these she said to the eldest doctor, I will give you on condition that you put off your marriage for a day and show me to go into his room alone at night. So the lady consented, but meanwhile the old wife had prepared a sleeping drink and given it to the knight, who had drank it and never wakened till next morning. The lealing night, her damosel sobbed and sang, 7 lang years I served for thee, the glassy hill I claimed for thee, the bloody shirt I rang for thee. Oh, it was a shirt. What are sarks? Was shirt? Okay. And wilt thou no wauken, and turn to me? It's not that it's technically written in the language, because that's the thing with it. You can look into people that are currently teaching Scottish, and like this is just the words of the language. It's just that it is very similar to English, because this is how English got a bunch of its words and all that. Anyway, okay. 7 lang years I served for thee, the glassy hill I climbed to thee, and wilt thou no wauken and turn to me? Next day she kentna what to do for grief. She then brak the pear, and found it filled with jewelry far richer than the contents of the apple. With thy jewels she bargained for permission to be a second night in the young knight's chamber, but the old wife gave him another sleeping drink. It said Scottish, and that is different from Gaelic. And this is reminding me a lot of specifically someone that was teaching Scottish. I know that they're related. This is different. Okay. And again he slept till morning. A night she kept sighing and singing as before. 7 lang years I served for thee, etc. Still he sleepit, and she nearly lost hope altogether. But that day, when she was out at the hunting, somebody asked him what noise was moaning. Was yon they heard that last night in his bedchamber? He said he heard na ony noise, but they assured him there was sae, and he resolved to keep waking that night to try what he could hear. That being the third night, and the damosel being between hope and despair, she brak her plum, and it held far the richest jewelry of the three. She bargained as before, and the old wife, as before, took in the sleeping drink to the young knight's chamber, but he telled her he couldna drink it that night without sweetening, and when she gaed away for some honey to sweeten it with, he poured out the drink, and sae he made the old wife think he had drunk it. They went to bed again, and the damosel began as before, singing, "7 lang years I served for thee, the glassy hill I climbed for thee, the bloody shirt I wrang for thee, and wilt thou no waken and turn to me?" He heard and turned to her, and she telled him a' that had befa'en her, and he telled her a' that had happened to him, and he caused the auld washerwife and her doctor to be burned. And they were married, and he and she are living happily to this day, for aught I ken. The end. This is very interesting. The whole breaking the fruit, having the jewels, selling it to be able to be in the room. That was another story. I know that happened in another story. And my brain thinks it was The Little Mermaid, but it wasn't. I know that we read something already that had... Oh, you want to see this one? Okay, I'll just do that in a second. The strangeness is that it has so many things. There was also the washing the bloody clothes, and then whoever can make it bright white and such. That was a thing in another story. I think it might have been in the Cinderella or something like that. So this one has, I think that this particular story got chopped up and fed into other stories based on how I know this would have been, being Scottish, washed over and hid away. I think that this story got mixed up like that. Okay, it's probably easy to just copy the link. But now you'll know exactly my site, so don't judge me when I misread things in the future. But this is the Blue Fairy book story, The Black Pool of Norroway. And it's so funny that this is absolutely from other things. And part of me wants to try and like just do the direct translation kind of thing. Like, oh, that's over all glass, that's of glass. Stuff like that. But the golden ring that is not for sale. The girl who had a golden ring that is not for sale. For now, all I can remember is the ring that pricked that guy into being a better man. I don't know why I can't think of anything else. Maybe, but I can't remember it. The golden comb. Yeah, she had the different items. It was a golden comb, maybe it was a golden ring. Those were the things that she sold to whoever it was that had the prince in her tower that she didn't want to give up. That was exactly it. But I don't remember what the name of that story was, what the rest of the pieces to that story was. I just remember that moment. And I know separately. And then there was the Glass Hill, which we just had, the Cinder lad with the glass hill for him. And so I'm like, oh my gosh, that was a thing too. So it feels like this story, either everybody was sharing some of the same things, or more likely it came from one place and then got scattered up. Like, this is the root story and then someone else had things. And yeah, I think that at the time that this was done, they half translated this based on how this is, maybe. And I know that lots of the stuff is sharing, and so it makes sense that it still looks very much like English, but there's also a good degree of like, no, I know some of these words very likely would have been different, but they also probably would have been easy to translate. So I think whoever edited this to put it in the Blue Fairy book did half translating. But this is so cool, and I honestly want to send that link to the Scottish TikToker that I was learning from. I think I might try and do that and try and be like, hey, I found this story and it looks like it's Scottish. But I doubt I would get anything back, so I'm just thinking of that person right now. Thanks, yeah. I'm surprised at this. Anyway, that was an adventure, and part of me wants to try it with like fully doing a Scottish accent as well as just doing a like, no, let's not humiliate myself kind of thing. I think it would all be fun. Yeah, specifically to your Scottish friends that know like old Scottish. The sorts that don't just say things in the accent, but are trying to learn the old stuff. 'Cause like I want to bring her up, the Scottish. I'm gonna look for her. Scottish teaching TikTok. Aha! I believe it's Scots language she's teaching. Scots word of the day that she does often. And her her nickname, let's try and copy the edit. Stop it. I'm just trying to copy that. Putting down the mic for both of my hands to use. You were told by that guy that was Gaelic. They'll be related and stuff, but it's sometimes, yeah. She has a really cool like language tree that she shows, like a linguist analysis thing where you can see where everything's related and they do flow into each other and why they seem alike, but there are distinct differences in times. And I think that this one would be Scots, but maybe I'm wrong. It's Miss Punny Penny, I think is. I'll type it out. Miss Punny Penny, that you should check out on TikTok if you have it. That's who I am thinking of. And she's just very entertaining with some of her stuff. Yeah, alright. Anyway. That was the Black Bull of Norroway. Make sure I have that listed on my thing. I hadn't written it in here. Norway. You can like put it into a web browser and join as a guest, but they'll probably like at first try to get you to sign up or whatever. I mean, that's what I just did just right now, because I usually have it just on my phone. I don't look at it on here. But okay. We have one more story in the Blue Book of Fairy Tales. It is not that long. And just going to try by myself sometime to make sure that we can watch it all. And oh my gosh. Oh yeah, that's fair, fine. Yeah. This one might have some Gaelic bits. I see some wit and O's, but it says specifically Irish. Red Etin of Ireland. So, brace yourselves. We have another one. It looks like slightly less dense of that stuff than the last one. But this is the Red Etin that I'm looking at right now. So, isn't this fun? We're just going to have a bunch at the end of this. That's hard-ish to follow along. Wonderful. Red Etin. You've heard that story? I have not heard of this story. But here we go. Well, fair enough. Alright. I will read. Okay. I'll probably end up doing again the awful half accented. I didn't prepare myself to learn the northern little island accents and words today, but I'm gonna try. Noisy chair. I'm gonna fight this thing. My other chair broke. I don't think you heard, Dumda. My other chair broke and fell apart on me. So I'm in this other chair that is a lot less good to sit in for long times, like this, and is very noisy sometimes. There were once 2 widows that lived on a small bit of ground, which they rented from a farmer. Thanks. And one of them had 2 sons, and the other had ane. Ane of them had 2 sons, and the other had ane. And by it was time for the wife that the 2 sons had to send them away to seek their fortune. So she told her eldest son, Ide, to take a can and bring her water from the well. Hello. Yeah, don't worry about lurking. It's good. We are in a story that is, oh, I didn't make sure the thing. I'm going to start over anyway. We just started a story that has a lot of different spellings because it's maybe slightly translated Gaelic or Irish. I'm not sure entirely what this is. Oh, it. I don't think it was because I was heavy, but like fair enough. That's it. It's that it was the chair was a used chair that I got, and the one arm of the chair was attached oddly, and it was very clear that like somehow it had been shoved back in. The way I saw it fallen apart, the metal seemed like it had been ripped, and it was just sticking out of the foam part of the seat, and I don't even fully understand how physically where things went or how it broke. It was probably something that was broken since I got it used, but had been like forced into a more usable position, or the metal had broken but it hadn't separated yet. I don't know. I'm not going to deal with it because I am worried that it will be sharp and cut me because there is sharp edges. But alright. There were once 2 widows. So I'm a little confused by then it's saying toi later. Yeah, that's fair. And I've broken chairs where it was the weakness of the chair and the heft of me. I've done that too, but it's usually a folding chair, not a nice chair. Yeah. Okay. There once was 2 widows that lived on a small bit of ground, which they rented from a farmer. And one of them had 2 sons, and the other had ane. And by it was time for the wife that the twa sons had to send them away to seek their fortune. So she told her eldest son, Ida, to take a can and bring her water from the well, that she might bake a cake for him. And however much or however little water he might bring, the cake would be great or sma accordingly. And that cake was to be that she could give him when he went on his travels. The lad gaed away with a can to the well, and filled it wi' water, and when came away hame again, but the can being broken, the maist part of the water had run out before he got back. So his cake was very small, yet small as it was, his mother asked if he was willing to take the half of it with her blessing, telling him that if he chose rather to have the hale, he would only get it wi' her curse. The young man, thinking he might hae to travel far away, and not knowing when or how he might get other provisions, said he would like to have the hale cake come of his mother's malison what like. So she gave him the hale cake and her malison along with it. See, this reads more Gaelic. There's just a little bit different to the word changings, I think. So they were going to split the cake, but now he's going to take the whole, but he would only get it with her curse and malison, what like? But he is asking for the whole cake now instead of the half. Then he took his brither aside and gave him a knife to keep till he should come back, desiring him to look at it every morning. Greedy. Well, he's taking it on a travel, and so he wants his food for the whole travel. It's debatable. And maybe if he had fixed up the bucket to take his water, if he had not lost all that water, it would have been bigger. Anyway, okay. Gave him the knife till he should come back, desiring him to look at it every morning and every laying as it continued to be clear, and then he might be sure that the owner of it was well. But if it grew dim and rusty, then for certain some ill had befallen them. So the young man set out to seek his fortune. Yeah, it's having very inconsistent spelling and choosing when things are translated in this case. It's a bit odd. So the young man set out to seek his fortune, and he gaed all that day, and all the next day, and on the third day in the afternoon he came up to where a shepherd was sitting with a flock of sheep. And he gaed up to the shepherd and asked him what the sheep belanged to. And the man answered, the Red Etin of Ireland ance lived in Belligan, and stole King Malcolm's daughter, the king of fair Scotland. He beats her, he binds her, he lays her on a band, and every day he dings her with a bright silver wand, like Julian the Roman. He's one that fears no man. It's said there's ane predestinate to his mortal foe, but that man is yet unborn, and lang may it be so. The young man then went on his journey, and he had not gone far when he espied an old man with white locks herding a flock of swine, and he gaed up to him, asked whose swine these were, and the man answered, the Red Etin of Ireland, and the whole rest. It says repeat the verses above, so the Red Etin of Ireland lived in Belligan and stole the King Malcolm's daughter, the king of fair Scotland. He beats her, he binds her, he lays her on a band, and every day he dings her with a bright silver wand, like Julian the Roman. He's one that fears no man. It's said there's ane predestinate to be his mortal foe, but that man is yet unborn, and lang may it be so. It's clear that it's supposed to be a rhyme, and so I'm gonna force the rhymes as it probably was then. And it says to repeat the verses, so I will. If you don't like the repetition, I'm sorry. Then the young man gayed on a bit further, and he came to another very old man herding goats, and when he asked whose goats they were, the answer was, the Red Etin of Ireland. Ants lived in Belligan, and stole King Malcolm's daughter, the king of fair Scotland. He beats her, he binds her, he lays her on a band, and every day he dings her with a bright silver wand. Like Julian the Roman, he's one that fears no man. It's said there's an predestinate to be his mortal foe, but yet that man is yet unborn, and lang may it be sown. This old man also told him to beware the next beasts that he should meet, for they were a very different kind from any he had yet seen. So the young man went on, and by he saw a multitude of dreadful beasts, ilk ane o' them wi' twa heads, and on every head 4 horns. 2 heads and 4 horns on each head. Ilk ane o' them. I don't know what that one's. Ilk ane of them. Maybe like 11 of them? I don't know. And he was sore frightened, and ran away from them as fast as he could, and glad as he was when he came to a castle. And glad was he when he came to a castle that stood on a hillock, with a door standing wide to the wa. And he gaed into the castle for shelter, and there he saw an old wife sitting beside the kitchen fire. He asked the wife if he might stay there for the night, and she was tired with a long journey, and the wife said he might. But it was not a good place for him to be in, as it belonged to the Red Etin, who was a very terrible beast with 3 heads, that spared no living man he could get hold of. The young man would have gone away, but he was afraid of the beasts on the outside of the castle, so he beseeched the old woman to conceal him as she could, and not to tell the Etin that he was there. He thought if he could put over the night, he might get away in the morning without meeting with the beasts, and so escape. But he had not been long in his hidey hole before the awful Etin came, and nae sooner was he in than he was heard crying, Snook but and snook ben, I find the smell of an earthly man. Be he living or be he dead, his heart this night shall kitchen my bread. And there's a footnote that kitchen is like season, so he will season my bread. Very much like the giant calling fee, fi, fo, fum, and such in Beanstalk. The monster soon found the poor man and pulled him from his hole, and when he had got him out, he told him that if he could answer him 3 questions, his life should be spared. The first was whether Ireland or Scotland was first inhabited. The second was whether man was made for woman or woman for man. The third was whether men or brutes were made first. The lad not being able to answer one of these questions, the Red Etin took a mace and knocked him on the head and turned him into a pillar of stone. On the morning after this happened, the younger brother took out the knife to look at it. He was so grieved to find it a brown wi' rust. He told his mother that the time was now come for him to go away upon his travels. So she requested him to take the can to the well for the water, that she might bake a cake for him. The can being broken, he brought hame. See, last time I didn't properly say that. Oh, every one. Okay, there you go. Thanks, Scratch Fury. Every one of them had 2 heads and 4 horns. That's what that was. Thanks for the assist. The can being broken, he brought hame as little as little water as the other had done, and the cake was little. She asked whether he would have the hale cake wi' her malazin, or the half wi' her blessing, and, like his brother, he thought it best to have the hale cake, come of the malazin that might. Maybe the resolution to all this is, take the half cake. Do as your mum wants. Maybe that's the moral that this is gonna be. Anyway, so he gave away, and everything happened to him that had happened to his brother. Yep, friggin' said so. The other widow and her son heard of all that had happened frae a fairy, and the young man determined that he would also go upon his travels and see if he could do anything to relieve his twa friends. So yeah, going way, way, way back, there was first 2 widows. One had 1 son, one had 2 sons. Those 2 sons did that nonsense, got into the same situations. Now the other widow with 1 son. Okay. So his mother gave him a can to go to the well and bring home water, that she might bake him a cake for his journey, and he gaed, and as he was bringing hame the water, a raven or a boon, so over above, maybe, his head cried to him to look, and he would see that the water was running out. And he was a young man of sense, and seeing the water running out, he took some clay and patched up the holes. See, that's what we had to do. So he brought home enough water to bake a large cake. When his mother put it to him to take the half cake wi' her blessing, he took it in preference to having the hale wi' her malazin, and yet the half was bigger than what the other lads had got thegither, because he had brought more water home, right? Okay, there you go. I had said that was the solution. So he gaed away on his journey, and after he had travelled a far way, he met with an old woman, and asked him if he would give her a bit of his bannock. And he said he would gladly do that, and so he gave her a piece of the bannock, and for that she gave him a magical wand, that she said might yet be of service to him if he took care to use it rightly. Then the old woman, who was a fairy, told him a great deal that would happen to him, and what he ought to do in circumstances. And after that she vanished in an instant o' his sight. He gaed on a great way farther, and then he came up to the old man herding the sheep. When he asked whose sheep these were, the answer was, this is going to ask me to not just repeat that old thing, but the whole thing, and I'm just going to say the one this time, I think. The Red Etin of Ireland ance lived in Belligan, and stole the King Malcolm's daughter, the King of fair Scotland. He beats her, he binds her, he lays her on a band, and every day he dings her with a bright silver wand. Like Julian the Roman, he's one that fears no man, but now I fear his end is near, and destiny at hand. And you're to be, I plainly see, the heir of all his land. So now when he asks the next men the same things that the other ones had, that's the response he gets. When he came to the place where the monstrous beasts were standing, he did not stop nor run away, but went boldly through among them. One came up roaring with open mouth to devour him, when he struck it with his wand, and laid it in an instant dead at his feet. He soon came to Etin's castle, where he knocked and was admitted. The old woman that sat by the fire warned him of the terrible Etin, and what had been the fate of the twa brothers. But he was not to be daunted. The monster soon came in, saying, "Snook bout and snook fin, I find the smell of an earthly man. Be he living or be he dead, his heart shall be kitchen to my bread." He quickly espied the young man, and bade him come forth on the floor. And then he put the 3 questions to him. But the young man had been told everything by the good fairy, so he was able to answer all the questions. When the Etin found this, he knew that his power was gone. What, so we don't get the answer to the questions? The young man then took up the axe and hewed off the monster's 3 heads. He asked next the old woman, not old this time, inconsistent, to show him where the king's daughters lay, and the old woman took him upstairs and opened a great many doors, and out of every door came a beautiful lady, who had been imprisoned there by the Etin, and ane of the ladies was the king's daughter. She also took him down into a low room, and there stood 2 stone pillars that he had only to touch with his wand when his 2 friends and neighbors started into life. And the hale of the prisoners were overjoyed at their deliverance, which they all acknowledged to be owing to the prudent young man. Next day they set out for the king's court, and a gallant company they made. And the king married his daughter to the young man that had delivered her, and gave a noble's daughter to ilk ane o' the other men, all of the other men, and so they lived happily a' the rest o' the days. And so they lived happily a' the rest o' the days. They all lived happily ever after. There you go. The end. That was the Red Etin. And that is all that I'll be reading for tonight. But wow, okay, the end. What did you guys think of that one? Dumda, if you wanted to be looking at what this one was, I'll put this link as well, so that you can send it to your friend. And either this I guess is Scottish, not Irish, since they're against the Etin of Ireland maybe, and that they like the Scottish princess, but who knows. And you can tell me next time if I was entirely wrong about which was Scots and which was Gaelic, or anyway. But alright, this has been my stream, and we're gonna wrap up. I hope that everyone is either cozily asleep, and that is lurking, or you are good to head out. Thanks, Black Silence. Thank you for being here. You have a good night too. Alright. I'm surprised Dumda has not said anything. We usually are chatty. Oh well. Oh, thank you for the subscription. Enjoy the frogs. Bequeath a wow frog for your subscription. Ah, wow. I am making more frogs as soon as I can, so there will be more of those soon. Alright. Good night, everybody, or good morning. Glad you think they're cute. And I will see you tomorrow. I'm going to cancel my earlier stream and just do the later one so I can get some, partially the emoji or the emotes creation and other things done. And then we will have that stream. And then I'll be done streaming for this week, and I'll get back up on Sunday again. Alright. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.